deaf experiences, deaf identity. One of the first questions usually asked of interviewees was whether they were born deaf or lost their hearing. In other words, their deaf story. How and when was their deafness detected? Did they lose their hearing? And if so, how? Was this spoken about in the family? All 13 interviewees were profoundly deaf. 6 were born deaf, and 7 lost their hearing in their formative years. One theme to emerge, particularly from those who were born deaf, was a lack of awareness or understanding or any detail on how their deafness was detected. The interpreter often had to phrase this question in several different ways, and answers were often vague and lacking in any depth or detail. The following extract demonstrates that for some, deafness was not something discussed in their families. They tested my hearing because people used to be calling me and I wasn't responding. I think I was one. You probably have to ask that question to my mom. I really don't know. We never had any conversations about it, but I had a friend who asked me once whether I was born deaf. So I asked my mom, was I born deaf? And she said, yes, you were born deaf. Those who lost their hearing and were old enough to remember described their emotional reaction, a sense of denial, frustration, and difficulty accepting their deafness. I didn't want to accept it, and I tried to make lots of excuses because I was in denial. And then I started thinking, oh no, I'm going to have to be wearing those big, ugly hearing aids. I hated the fact that I couldn't hear. I hated the fact that my family couldn't communicate with me anymore. They didn't know how to sign, but I was learning how to sign. With deaf people, I had to use my hands, and the deaf teachers said, I really need to use my hands. And I said, why do I have to? One parent adds insight into why deafness may not have been openly or frequently discussed in the family environment. Because, to tell the truth, when my sister called me and said that the doctors say that Sam is deaf and to take him to the development center, I said, God, no mother wants to know that she has a child with a disability. Deaf participants described a stigma attached to deafness, an almost fearful reaction to finding out that a child is deaf, and for good reason. The experiences captured here paint a picture of a lack of access, lack of inclusion, and lack of opportunity for those labeled disabled or deaf. The experiences shared below suggest that rather than bolstering a deaf child or young adult with the appropriate support to enable access and inclusion, deaf children are too often cast aside and treated almost as lost causes that should be separated out and babied. My thinking is that it's really a Caribbean thing and our behavior is quite backwards. It seems like this is a generational thing, a stigma attached to deafness. The world's attitudes towards deaf people are changing, but when you live in a small place, a lot of people haven't traveled. They haven't experienced the world, and they don't know much about deafness, so they still think that deafness means that you're dumb and, they don't bother. Deaf people need opportunities. I really want people to be able to see us as human and not just say, you're deaf, you can't do that. Don't treat us like babies. Don't say that I can't do something. Language deprivation. One major factor impeding the development and progress of deaf children is language deprivation. This starts in the home environment with very few parents understanding the importance of and having the opportunity, time, or incentive to learn sign language. This leaves deaf children lacking in the opportunity to acquire fundamental language building blocks and meet developmental milestones, but also emotionally isolated and unable to connect with their significant others. My mother, she always thought sign language. What that meant was it was difficult for me to bond with, to have a relationship with her even now. For me, that is so precious to be able to bond with my family. Now that I'm all alone, loneliness has become a problem for me, actually. My mom signs a little, but mostly she talks and texts. Being language deprived from early, that's one of the top challenges because many deaf, they didn't become deaf as adults. 8 of them were born deaf and some of them acquired deafness in early childhood. So one of the top challenges is language deprivation. It means that they cannot have that bonding, that relationship which is so crucial and important for them with their families and with others on the outside. So one of the top challenges here on the island is language deprivation. They needed language. Even when they were just babbling as a baby, they can learn the sign for I love you, hand on the heart, for example, milk. I mean, it is so easy to teach babies to sign. They can start signing even before they start speaking. So it means that education will start for them a little later. By the time they go to school, they should still be able to know basics. My mom signs a little bit. We communicate by lip reading because she only signs a bit. Hearing people need to understand that our first language is sign language, and that is how we communicate best. With the deaf, what is important is communication going from one heart and mind to the next that is so important. Unfortunately, this language deprivation continues into the school system. They start school at 3 years old, and in a situation where teachers have no idea what they're doing or how to teach a deaf person, most of the teachers go to the school, they have no knowledge of sign language and don't know how to sign, which means the education that children then receive is poor. It's like daycare. They go there from 3 to 18 or 17 years old, and I was shocked to learn how little deaf people learn. The teachers were no good. They needed to learn to sign better. We had the issue with teachers coming in and not knowing how to sign, and that was a big problem. I didn't think it was fair to have teachers coming in that couldn't sign to teach deaf children. The teachers didn't really sign. So we felt like, we would be teaching them. My heart really goes out to them because they are deprived so much, and they really have the potential. They can do so much. I think it would work so much better if someone who understands deafness would teach them, reach their hearts, reach their minds. It's a very sad story. They are so English. The deaf, they don't think in words, they think in ideas, in concepts. But the teachers, they're like, my name is. How can a hearing person who does not know the deaf, does not know sign language, teach? They're actually using a foreign language to teach a child that I really have difficulty comprehending. Maybe it is a good thing I'm not working there. It would just create conflict because I'm thinking in sign. They think in English, and I want to be able to match the children with what they are thinking and feeling, but with sign, not words. School gave us baby words and baby thing to do. This was not the case for all interviewees. Some described strong parental and grandparental support, and families that made great effort to communicate and connect with them. One mother describes her determination to learn sign language. Okay, my story as well. When Jason first started school at 3 years, the school was giving free sign language classes to the parents. Other parents were there long before me. They were so advanced, I had no clue what they were saying. So I used to work shifts, and when I'm off during the day, I would go to school with Jason and sit in his class, and that is how I learned sign language. Sign language is like any other language. If you don't keep using it, you lose it. I don't really like going on YouTube, though, because they have so much different signs, different to the ones that I'm accustomed to, and to the ones that the deaf people here are accustomed to. So when I go to do it, they change it so much that when I sign to the deaf here, they don't know what I'm talking about. So I tried to keep in tune with the deaf here. I have to, because Jason's friends, when they have problems or others can't understand, they come to me. So I just try to catch up on the signs so that I can understand what they're saying, and they can understand what I am saying so I can help them. Another describes their relationship with their great-grandmother. Me and my great-grandmother were really close. We had our own language, and I could understand. I was used to her, and she was used to me. Parental support. One major factor which seemed to impact on the outcomes of the deaf community members interviewed here was parental support. Some interviewees described extremely supportive, protective, and empowering parental attitudes, while others described restrictive, negative approaches characterized by deaf can't misconceptions. This created almost two camps in terms of how the interviewees felt about life. One camp described being marched off to sign up for their Social Security niche check once they had finished school. I tried to tell my mom that I'd like to set up selling food, and she said, "Don't worry about that, you can't hear." My mom thinks that deaf can't. Not only my mom, my whole family. It makes me feel really depressed and sad. I want my mom to be proud of me. Many deaf people have the same experience of lack of support. They all say that I can't. They say you can't because you are deaf. I remember one time I went to a workshop about sex and HIV, and they gave me a wristband that said, "My body, my choice." So when I went home and my mom was telling me this and that, what I couldn't do, I showed her the band saying, "My body, my choice." I said nothing. I just showed her the band and walked away. The next day she said, "You can't do this, you can't do that. You can't go with your friends, you can't find a job, and you can't get a driver's license." She told me that I can't because I'm deaf. So I told her I wanted to go and work on a ship. My parents told me no. They said, "You'll drown, you won't be able to hear the people on the ship." So that band, I always used to show it to them, "My body, my choice." So after that, my mom changed her mindset and I started doing what I wanted to do. My family doesn't support me in finding a job. My mother is the one who took me to NIAS, which is Social Security, to apply for my money that we get twice a month. But other than that, that's it. She told me that I can't drive because I am deaf. And when came to visit me in his car, she was like, "He can drive?" She was surprised. I told my mother that I really wanted to work, and my mom would just say, okay. She just didn't say anything. The others described a fiery attitude towards life, a realization that they would need to be able to stick up for themselves, and a confidence and belief that they could achieve their goals. If anybody says something to me that wasn't right, my grandmother would make a big noise. She was always quarreling with people. People say that she's a spoil me too much. People say all my life she spoiled me. She always check on me, ask me and make sure if I was okay and how I was doing. I have to be honest with you, my mother spoils me as well. My mother has never really wanted to say, can't. She always wanted the best for me. She always wanted a better life for me. She wanted me always to be on par with hearing people, you know? If something happened, we have open discussion, explanation, everything. What if I'm thinking something? I tell her, she shares with me. So my mother really doesn't tell me no and does not accept the word no. My entire family is like this. Before, when it was my great-great-grandmother, being deaf and hearing the word can't, it was not happening. My mother and I talk about my life and what it is for me to be a deaf person. My mother and I have a special bond, so we will talk about things like school, and my lack of access and me not being able to really get a job, and how tough things are for me. And also, even the matter of interpreting, there are a whole set of things that we talk about. My family were very supportive. They made sure I got a better education, that I got the best education. My family are always telling people you know that even though I'm deaf, they need to respect me. My mom is always with me. So a lot of people know that I am deaf, and they can see that I can do anything. My family just kept pushing me, encouraging me. We were really close. They would tell me, not to be afraid and not to give up. Parent, I think I am lucky to have him. That's true. I really think I am. My problem is family. My family had Lionel so spoiled. Dear God, my family and my neighbors know that Lionel is deaf. And up to this day, if I ever raise my voice to Lionel, they say, "Why are you shouting at Lionel? What did Lionel do?" I mean, to this day, God, they love him. It wasn't easy, but we've made it this far.